the complete picture of what happened at the Oceanfront last night that resulted in property damage, some injuries, and some arrests. Like other cities, we came to understand that the vast majority of the people came to protest and give voice to justifiable anger over another senseless death of an African-American male in the hands of a law enforcement officer. And like other cities, our police force was working to ensure those rights were protected by escorting the protesters, clearing and diverting traffic, and allowing the people to take over the road. A few people who appeared well-equipped, inciting the violence, made the situation unsafe for all and caused needless destruction and injury. This afternoon, we want to do those events and discuss plans going forward. May I now introduce Interim Police Chief Tony Zucaro.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon. Wanted to take a moment and talk about the events of yesterday as they unfolded. Our day began early at about 10:30 yesterday, Sunday morning, when a member of my leadership team received a phone call from a leadership person in our community telling them of a scheduled demonstration that was going to take place at the intersection of Virginia Beach Boulevard and Bird Neck Road at the Food Lion. The information that was shared was that a peaceful demonstration was going to start at that intersection, walk Virginia Beach Boulevard to 11th Avenue, and then return westbound, concluding at the 2nd Police Precinct, which is located at 820 Virginia Beach Boulevard. Captain Shannon Wichendahl, the commanding officer of the 2nd Precinct, coordinated this information after receiving a phone call from Pat Gallagher. I was notified shortly thereafter and made arrangements to respond to the precinct and meet with those demonstrators. Upon my arrival Sunday afternoon, Captain Wichendahl had previously met with this group of demonstrators that were about 30 to 35 persons strong and had a conversation. I engaged in a conversation with that group, expressed concerns and horror of what we've all seen on video from Minneapolis. We had what I would consider a very provoking conversation, a good dialogue, and I gave the persons in attendance my pledge as the chief of police to meet with them and continue meeting with our citizens in this healing process. So, while this was taking place at about 4 o'clock, we received our first information from our intelligence staff that a group associated with a local area group was going to converge on Norfolk. They were going to do a peaceful demonstration at Norfolk and then go to Virginia Beach. We had information that they were going to arrive at Virginia Beach at literally 7:57, almost 8 o'clock, and they were going to convert at Rudy Loop. Captain Shannon Wichendahl and myself attempted to contact the organizer. We managed to meet with the organizer in person, not far from the Rudy Loop area. Unfortunately, I'm sad to report we were unable to meet with the organizer at that point or any time throughout the day. As we monitored the Rudy Loop, we saw crowds of people starting to form. At about 7:40, I would estimate that we had about 50 persons at the Rudy Loop that were forming. We made the decision, both from a strategy and a tactical perspective, to engage members of our community, attempt to have a conversation, to learn what the plan was, and to facilitate peaceful and organized demonstration. Unfortunately, we were unsuccessful in identifying the leader, and unfortunately, we were unable to engage in a productive conversation. We then made the decision to allow this group to advance on Atlantic Avenue. We had pre-planned this activity. As I said, this was a strategic and tactical decision. We blocked off Atlantic Avenue, allowing the pedestrians to walk northbound on Atlantic Avenue. And quite candidly, it was remarkable. A large crowd. As the crowd moved north, the crowd numbers swelled. Some have said as high as maybe 700. We're still looking at that, but nevertheless, the crowd swelled. We learned from our field observations that persons joined the crowd by parking at the municipal lot at 19th Street. We saw many people joining the crowd from Boardwalk. So as you can imagine, the enthusiasm and the thrust of this crowd grew and swelled. But generally speaking, it was a very peaceful crowd. They were chanting. They were singing songs. As I looked into the crowd, I saw a wide array of demographics: age, race, gender. I saw persons carrying backpacks. I saw many people wearing masks like many of you are wearing here today. But I want to remind everybody, we're in a unique time with coronavirus and our public health safety crisis. So typically, when we have large-scale demonstrations and donning a face covering, that's against the state code. Well, in the health crisis, that filter is one we cannot consider as being of criminal intent. But we were mindful of the crowd and we were watching. I noted to Deputy Chief Gallagher as we were on the field monitoring the crowd, I saw one woman with a instrument that was deploying smoke. Typically in tactical environments, that smoke is used to detect the wind direction. I saw that early on. We shared that with our folks. We shared that backpacks. As they were walking northbound, many of them retrieved additional items from the backpack. Most of them bandana-styled fabric that they put over their existing face covering. Again, that's indicative of a plan that we saw and we shared. As the crowd progressed and swelled, they got to about 25th Street and stalled. We were all hopeful that they were going to take that moment and redirect their energies, but they continued. They moved on to 32nd Street, made a left at 32nd Street going westbound, and then traveled Pacific Avenue southbound. At about 10 p.m., the members of this group became aggressive. Our men and women sustained throwing objects and projectiles at our officers. We watched and observed a couple of the storefront windows being damaged. At about 10:30, I declared an unlawful assembly, and shortly thereafter, we were confronted with tear gas deployed at us from the demonstrators. We had sufficient resources to respond while still trying to maintain a perimeter of the crowd, both on the east side and west side as they were moving forward. As the crowd swelled, and even though we upstaffed as best we could on short notice, because literally this all happened in a couple of moments' breath, I sought out mutual aid from my peer partners to include the State Police, Chesapeake Police, Portsmouth Police, and Norfolk Police. I'm very thankful that each of those departments and leadership team sent me staff to help manage this civil disturbance. As we progressed, the crowd became very hostile and engaged. We had several police cars damaged. We had a total of 5 police cars damaged with their windshields and being damaged and broken out. We also had members of the crowd jump on one of our police cars at 11th and and started inciting the crowd with loud chants. And that really spawned a lot of activity. We had 2 officers from Virginia Beach that sustained injuries. I'm thankful to report they are minor injuries. One officer twisted his ankle on the debris that was thrown at us. Another officer sustained neck, shoulder, and knee injuries after being hit with a cinder block. I want to tell you that we had persons not only breaking storefront windows, we had them picking up trash cans, throwing them at the police officers. We had them throwing them at storefronts, and we also had incidents of various persons lighting the trash and Dipsy dumpsters. Our partners, the fire department, I affectionately call Team Red, were with us shoulder to shoulder. They went and had response teams guided with our personnel to put out those brush fires as best we could and as frequently and often as we could. Our damage assessment is ongoing. Ms. Sutton's going to talk about that here in a moment. From our count, there was almost 50 businesses in the Oceanfront that were damaged. We had a number of arrests, but I need to remind the community that our first task was preserve life, preserve property. So that was the mission that I challenged my women and men of the department to do. And I stand here before you to say, I think we were successful in the challenges that we met. As we move forward, we continue to plan. We don't know what the future nights bring. I do tell you that we are prepared to balance the community's ability to invoke their First Amendment right of free speech, but we're also here to ensure that life, limb, and property of our community is safeguarded. This type of behavior, this lawless behavior is unacceptable, and we are prepared to take proper law enforcement action against the violators that we've encountered. In short, I would like to conclude an analysis of the outcomes. As we stand here after a full night's activities, and I didn't leave the Oceanfront area until 05 o'clock this morning, and I surveyed the resort, and I went home and reflected on our efforts. And highly critical of myself and our decisions. I was highly critical of how we could improve. And I say that with this in mind. At the end of the day, no business sustained significant damage. No city building sustained significant damage. Yes, there was storefront windows broken. Yes, there was some fires burned. On the while I'm not applauding that 2 of our officers received injuries, they were minor injuries, and the one officer, I'm proud to say, not only went to the emergency room to get checked out, he came back to the command post and volunteered to stay with me to monitor the radio. I do have to report I have at least one situation where a citizen was a victim of a hit and run. That citizen sustained minor injuries. I would classify as bumps, scrapes, and bruises, and that was from a private vehicle trying to leave the crowd after being surrounded by the crowd. And I will say, This group has been very robust and vibrant on social media. I would just ask everybody in the community to be mindful of the message that is being sent by certain people in the community. I'm here to share what I saw. I'm here to report what happened. I'm not here to editorialize or frame it other than telling you what happened. Others on the social media may not be taking that same vantage point. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I would ask Ms. Sutton to come forward.
Good afternoon. Just a few updates from emergency management and to cover a few things that Chief Zucaro mentioned. We did conduct a damage assessment this morning of the businesses affected by last night's events. There were 48 businesses that sustained some level of damage going through last evening. The damages ranged anywhere from $1,000 to $50,000, and a total estimate at this point is just under $317,000 worth of damage to the Let me clarify that that does not include the internal merchandise that may have been taken, but the outside with glass windows. We had one location that had dozens of 4x6 windows that were destroyed. The cleanup began. Public Works was out very quickly and efficiently in clearing the streets of broken glass, the debris from the fires and trash cans. Also assisting in getting all of the graffiti. There was a large amount of spray paint from the streets, the sidewalks, the walls, and buildings as well. Trash cans have been picked up and removed for this evening and the rest of the week. The other piece that I want to clarify as we are moving forward in looking at this evenings to come, we have for today closed all Atlantic Avenue on-street parking. Also, municipal parking lots in the resort will be closed at 6 p.m. And we will have restricted access throughout the resort area. So there will be barricades that are up to route traffic to assist with movement. I do want to emphasize that as we work together in supporting the protests and supporting the response, we do work in a unified command process with the Virginia Beach Police Department as the lead. We do continuous training and preparation with all of our public safety agencies so they work well together. And I want to remind everyone that Virginia Beach is one of the safest cities of our size in the United States, and we work well together to continue. I want to thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You know, I want to thank Interim Chief Zucaro and Erin Sutton, but also going forward, the interim chief and I have petitioned Governor Northam to let us have the same type of curfew that is in Richmond at this point in terms of going forward. And let me just thank our policemen and women, for what they have doing for making a great city. So now we'll bring the chief back for questions.
So before I get to questions, I just wanted to take the opportunity. I mentioned the broadcasts that are being shared on social media. I mentioned that it's my job and responsibility to give you unedited and non-biased information. So we've prepared some video that I'd like to share with you. But in advance of that, I do want to remind our community that what happened last night and early this morning is tragic. But rest assured that your department has prepared for these type events for a number of years. We have a strong training protocol that has been recognized nationally as the Gold Star edition, if you will, of training. We have some of the best selected folks. So I talk about training, I talk about talent. I talk about tactics, and I talk about teamwork when I speak to my members. And what you saw last night and this morning is an exhibit of the training. I think you saw the women and men of Virginia Beach Police Department exhibit great restraint in the face of terrible verbal abuse, physical assaults with projectiles, and being assaulted by tear gas, being assaulted in their vehicles. So our training, our discipline is reflected. I've also been asked at several of these community gatherings, what is the police department doing moving forward since the George Floyd incident? And my response has been, the Virginia Beach Police Department has been prepared for this for quite some time. We've had our training and our policies. Our policies are actually on the city's website. You can access them, and you can read what our policies are. But we've addressed these hard and thought-provoking questions on police use of force, on police force accountability, on community stakeholders, and we've also adopted what I'll call an active bystander program with our officers, where we, part of the training and policy mandate, that they have to step in to mitigate an action by an officer that's not proper, it's not lawful. So prior to starting the film, I'd just like to conclude that the officers' actions that you saw tonight were measured, they were disciplined, they were within the boundaries of best practices, and clearly within the boundaries of state code. So if I can ask my media team to cue up the video. So I apologize for some of those technical difficulties, but I think you can, the video, get a sense of the volume of people that the officers were encountering. Mr. Mayor?
Okay, at this point, any questions for the chief or myself or Ms. Sutton?
How many arrests were made total?
So we made a total of 19 arrests. 2 of those were felony arrests. 16 were misdemeanor arrest, and 1 was a traffic summons. Let me speak to the breakdown of the arrested persons, because typically I know that's a point of concern or of interest. Of those arrested persons, 19 persons had a total of 28 charges. Those 19 people came from 4 from the city of Virginia Beach, 9 from the Hampton Roads area, 4 from other areas outside of, not in Virginia, but not Hampton Roads, and 2 elsewhere. As far as the demographics, just over 50% were African American, and just over 40% were white. There was another little bit over 5% that were deemed as unknown or other.
Can you say what they were charged with?
So the charges range from carrying a concealed weapon on a subsequent offense, simple assault on a law enforcement, breaking in with to commit a felony, and the misdemeanors included receiving stolen goods, unlawful assembly, larceny, altering and defacing serial numbers, and some other violations of animals on the beach, obstruction of justice, and obstruction of law enforcement officers, and some public intoxications.
Chief, could you also clarify, too, the 2 officers that were injured, were they Virginia Beach police officers?
Yes, they were. Both Virginia Beach officers, and again, thankfully, in the grand scheme of things, minor injuries. Like I said, the one fella that got struck in the block went to the ER, got treated, and actually came back to the command post and joined me in the command post radio and scribing, taking notes for us. So I'm very, very proud of both those officers.
And you said that people in the crowds deployed tear gas.
That is,
Did any police officers deploy tear gas?
we did deploy tear gas shortly after that in response to that gas deployment at us. The crowd was surging. They were approaching us with the large trash cans in hand to our civil disturbance line, if you will, and the tactical commander on the ground made the decision to deploy gas to disperse that crowd. It was effective, and to a degree, it helped disperse those numbers in that immediate vicinity.
You gave a specific example there, but would you be able to also walk through what the protocol is for law enforcement, your police department, to install those measures in place during things like this?
So we do annual training. We do a volume of training that we call in-service training that's mandated by the Department of Criminal Justice Services, short for commonly called DCJS. In addition to that state-mandated training, the Virginia Beach Police Department trains above and beyond the state mandate. One of those training evolutions has been crowd control and management of crowds. We've been doing that for a number of years because we are exposed in a resort area for large crowds. We have a host of special events. So we couple our training with those tactics, those procedures. We have a structured protocol, and there's cascading levels on where that force can be used. It also comports with our use of force policy. We have a very strict use of force policy, probably one of the most restrictive and compelling in the nation for a police department. So we build on that. Those decisions are thoughtful, they're deliberate, they're not taken lightly. But again, when your men and women are being confronted by trash cans being thrown at them, projectiles being thrown at them, tear gas being thrown at them and deployed at them, we were in a position to protect the community, but protect the women and men of our department. And I think they did that admirably.
Wanted to also ask as well, was we got videos sent to from people who said that they were out there, and the video shows what it looks like a red pickup truck driving down a road with people that were around it. We've talked to people about this video, but wanted to ask you if you're aware of this video, if you could speak onto this and anything pertaining to the driver of the truck.
So that's a great question. As many of you do know, our resort is blessed with a camera system, so we have state-of-the-art technology to help in these very situations. I can tell you it was very helpful to be able to monitor the crowd, gauge the crowd. We used our aerial support. So we have some video of that vehicle. We observed that vehicle. We attempted to locate that vehicle. We sent what we call a quick reactionary, we call it a QRF for short, to try and track down that vehicle. We were not successful this morning. However, my investigative team, led by Deputy Chief Gallagher, is scrubbing the videos. What we hope to be able to do is look back in the rearview mirror of videos and see if we can see that same video at a different point in time, and then look closer at the occupants, the driver, the license plate. So right now, we're still looking for that vehicle. If anybody in the community is aware of who the operator or occupants of that vehicle are, I would encourage them to call our Detective Bureau at 385-4141 to share that information. But right now, we're still looking for that vehicle. We had several other vehicles that presented problems for different sources of reason. That red vehicle that you spoke of was very troubling.
In your investigation, could you maybe elaborate just kind of what you found out, what was the background as to how this happened?
What part of how it happened?
As far as if you've learned anything from eyewitnesses, as far as what was in place or what led to the truck being shown in that video?
At this point, I have very limited information on that. I actually saw it live video feed when it happened. So I have limited information on what precipitated that and where those guys went after the fact. But our staff has been asked as one of the actionable items for today's investigative effort to try and track that down as we can.
What was troubling about it? You described it as troubling. What was troubling about what you saw?
Well, I mean, it was high speed, it was crowded, it was in the middle of, a bunch of folks trying to conduct a peaceful demonstration. It was very disruptive.
Also speak to about do you know how and where protesters got their hands on tear gas?
No, that's a beautiful question. I wish I had the tea leaves to be able to answer that. The reality of it is, I think these folks, some of them came prepared for disruption. Like I said earlier in my description of the crowd, it was really a good crowd. It was a crowd of mixed age, mixed demographics. A lot of people were there to really peacefully demonstrate, and our responsibility is to support that, and I think we did that. Unfortunately, I can't speak to the evil intent of these persons, but based on my personal observations, based on information that my staff has shared through their leadership team to me, I feel like we can say with certainty that there were persons embedded in this group that had evil intent, and they took advantage of a terrible tragedy in another part of our nation to do this here in Virginia Beach. I also, just as a side note, I asked my staff to scrub how many other cities in the nation have experienced this. Well, my information is, and part of the information I got is from the Major Cities Chiefs Association, as well as from the FBI, and I've been in communication with both the MCC Association on weekly phone calls, as well as speaking to the supervisor in charge at the FBI. I'm sad to report that we've had 132 municipalities throughout the city, the nation, that have experienced protests beyond peaceful. So I think what we're seeing here may be just an example of a concerted effort. Clearly, some observation indicate some folks came with an end game in mind.
Are there any plans that we know of or any future demonstrations tonight or this?
So that's a challenging question. When I tell you we've been looking at that since yesterday morning we've been looking at it since yesterday morning at 10. We have a team that is not their exclusive responsibility, but a good portion of their work week is committed to intelligence gathering, scrubbing social media, cooperating and communicating with peer agencies, partner agencies in the area with our state and federal partners. So I've been on the phone speaking to some of the chiefs. I said I was on the phone with the FBI SAC. We're still looking at that. We're getting some snippets, but the snippets we're getting are no dates, no times. In fact, we're learning that there may be additional events of Event 2 and Event 3, with Event 2 being maybe in July and Event 3 in August or September. So that doesn't help anyone. It certainly doesn't help the city to better prepare. So we're looking at that, and we're very receptive. If any information is gleaned in the community from your loved ones or in passing, please share that with us.
So just to be clear, it was people in the crowd who used tear gas before police?
That is clear. And I will tell you, prior to the tear gas being deployed, we were subject to projectiles being thrown at us. We were subject to trash cans being thrown at us. And then the crowd dispersed tear gas in the area at my women and men that was standing there protecting this community.
Okay, thank you all very much. Appreciate it.